The knock on the door came at 8:17 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday. Jack Brennan wasn't expecting anyone, and for a brief moment, he considered ignoring it. His apartment, a sleek downtown loft that screamed successful bachelor, was his sanctuary after grueling days at the investment firm. At 42, he'd crafted exactly the life he wanted. No complications, no commitments beyond the next quarter's projections. The knocking persisted, more urgent now. Jack sighed, set down his glass of 18-year-old Macallan, and crossed the polished concrete floor. When he pulled open the door, the woman standing there wasn't immediately familiar. Something in her eyes, maybe. A particular shade of amber green that tugged at his memory. But it was the boy beside her that made Jack's world tilt on its axis. "Hello, Jack," she said, her voice steady despite the slight tremble in her hand as she rested it on the boy's shoulder. "This is Ethan. He's 10 years old, and he's your son." The boy looked up at him with eyes that were unmistakably his own. The same steel blue that stared back at Jack from the mirror every morning. The same slight furrow between the brows when concentrating. Jack's throat closed up. His fingers went numb on the doorknob. "I think," the woman, Melissa, he suddenly remembered, said quietly, "we need to talk." The world Jack had so carefully constructed began to crack apart, right there in his doorway, with the rain falling steadily behind them. 11 years earlier, Jack had been a different man, or perhaps just a less polished version of the same one. 31, already climbing the corporate ladder at Westridge Partners, but still clinging to the edges of his college self. That weekend in Chicago had been for a friend's bachelor party. He remembered fragments, the upscale bar with its leather booths and amber lighting, the easy confidence that came with success, and 3 perfectly mixed old fashions. Melissa had been at the bar, all dark curls and quiet intelligence. A pediatric nurse, she'd told him, in town for a medical conference. Their conversation had flowed effortlessly, rising above the typical bar chat. They'd talked about everything, her work with children, his recent promotion, books they'd both read, places they wanted to travel. For those hours, Jack had allowed himself to imagine a different kind of life, one where connections went deeper than networking events and casual dates. They'd ended up in his hotel room, and in the morning, they'd exchanged numbers with vague promises to stay in touch if she ever visited New York, or if he found himself back in Minneapolis. But as Jack had boarded his flight home, he'd already been mentally preparing for the Anderson merger presentation. By the time he landed at JFK, Melissa had become a pleasant memory, nothing more. He never called, she never texted. Life moved forward, as it always did. Now, sitting across from her at his kitchen island while Ethan explored the apartment with the cautious curiosity of a child in unfamiliar territory, Jack struggled to process the nuclear bomb she'd dropped on his carefully ordered existence. "Why now?" he finally managed, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. "It's been 10 years, Melissa." She looked tired, he realized. The spark he remembered had been tempered by a decade of single motherhood. "I never planned to tell you," she admitted, turning her coffee mug in slow circles. "I found out I was pregnant 6 weeks after Chicago. I tried calling you twice, but you never answered. I left one voicemail that you never returned." Jack winced, remembering his habit of ignoring unknown numbers, of clearing voicemails without listening if they weren't from recognized contacts, a simple, efficient system that had just revealed its catastrophic flaw. "I decided then that we'd be okay on our own," she continued, "and we have been. I have a good job, supportive parents, a nice life in Minneapolis." She paused, watching Ethan as he examined Jack's collection of vintage vinyl records. "But he started asking questions about his father, difficult questions I can't keep deflecting. So you found me." "LinkedIn," she said with a small, humorless smile. "You've done well for yourself." Jack ran a hand through his hair, noticing with strange detachment that it was shaking. "I need a paternity test," he said, the words coming out more harshly than he'd intended. Melissa didn't flinch. Of course, I expected that. But look at him, Jack. Really look. And he did. The boy had wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline with his hands pressed against the glass. The same way Jack had stood when he'd first viewed the apartment 3 years ago. The same posture, the same tilt of the head. He has your mother's chin, Melissa said quietly. I saw it in the photos on your desk that morning in Chicago. Something cold and heavy settled in Jack's stomach. He remembered those photos, his parents on their 40th anniversary, just months before his father's first stroke. The silver frame he'd packed away when he moved to this apartment, unable to look at his father's smiling face anymore. I'll take the test, he said, but I need time to process this. We're staying at the Westgate through Sunday, Melissa replied, standing and gathering her purse. Ethan has spring break this week. I thought you might want to get to know him, regardless of what comes next. As they prepared to leave, Ethan approached Jack with a directness that was disconcerting. Mom says you work with money, he said, his voice carrying the slight lilt of the Midwest. I do, Jack replied, suddenly aware of how inadequate those 2 words were. Cool, Ethan said with a shrug. I'm good at math, best in my class. Pride, unexpected, unearned, and overwhelming, surged through Jack. That's great. At the door, Melissa handed him a card with her number. Ball's in your court, Jack. But remember, there's a child involved now. Whatever you decide affects him most of all. After they left, Jack poured another scotch with trembling hands and sat in the dark, staring at the smudges Ethan's fingers had left on his immaculate windows. The paternity test results arrived via email on Thursday morning, though Jack had known the truth before he even opened the attachment. The DNA confirmation was just a formality, a business procedure for a situation that defied all business logic. He'd spent the past 2 days in a fog, moving through client meetings and conference calls on autopilot while his mind circled endlessly around the fact that he had a son. A 10-year-old boy who had existed for a decade without Jack knowing, breathing, growing, learning. 10 birthdays, 10 Christmases, first steps, first words, first day of school. All moments Jack had missed without even knowing he was missing them. After staring at the results for 20 minutes, he finally called Melissa. Can I see him? He asked without preamble when she answered. There was a pause. He has a school project due Monday. He brought it with him, something about famous landmarks. He wants to take pictures of the Empire State Building. I can take him, Jack said quickly, then hesitated. If that's okay with you, and him. They arranged to meet at Bryant Park at 4. Jack canceled his afternoon meetings, something he'd done perhaps 3 times in his entire career. His assistant had looked at him as if he'd grown a second head when he'd told her to reschedule the Nakamura call. Jack arrived early, pacing the perimeter of the park, rehearsing what to say. How did you begin a relationship with a child who was half you but entirely a stranger? What was the protocol for becoming an instant father? He spotted them by the carousel, Ethan's dark hair, Melissa's color, Jack's slight wave, catching the afternoon sunlight. The boy was pointing at something, animated in a way he hadn't been in the muted atmosphere of Jack's apartment. Hey, Jack said, approaching awkwardly, feeling like an intruder despite the biological connection that linked them. Hi, Ethan replied, studying Jack with open curiosity. Mom says you're going to take me to see the Empire State Building. If you want, Jack said, glancing at Melissa, who stood slightly apart, giving them space. I have a list, Ethan announced, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. Of the buildings I need for my project, Mom said we can only do a few today because we don't have much time. Jack looked at Melissa. We could take all afternoon. I don't have any more meetings. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or caution. We have dinner reservations at 7, she said. Cancel them, Jack heard himself say. I know a place near the High Line that Ethan might like. It has these milkshakes with entire slices of cake on top. Ethan's eyes widened. For real? For real, Jack confirmed, feeling the first genuine smile in days spread across his face. Mom, can we? Ethan turned to Melissa, who looked torn. This wasn't what we discussed, Jack, she said quietly. I know, he acknowledged, but I'd like the chance to get to know him, to start something. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but we need to talk, really talk, at some point. The afternoon unfolded in a way Jack couldn't have anticipated. Ethan, it turned out, was fascinated by architecture. He knew facts about the Empire State Building that Jack, despite living in New York for 15 years, had never heard. At the top of the rock, Ethan explained about Art Deco design elements with the confidence of a tour guide. How do you know all this? Jack asked as they gazed out over Central Park. Ethan shrugged. I read a lot. Mom takes me to the library every Saturday. He devours books, Melissa added. His teachers can't keep up with him. Pride swelled in Jack's chest again, alongside a sharp pang of regret for all the Saturday library trips he'd missed. At the restaurant, over ridiculously elaborate milkshakes, Jack watched Ethan's face light up with childish delight. It struck him how complete this boy's personality already was. His interests, his sense of humor, his way of tilting his head when considering something new, all developed without Jack's input or influence. Do you have any other kids? Ethan asked suddenly, catching Jack mid-sip. Ethan, Melissa cautioned. It's okay, Jack said. No, I don't. You're my only child. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Why didn't you and Mom stay together? The direct question, delivered with a child's innocent bluntness, hit Jack like a physical blow. He looked at Melissa, who was watching him carefully. We didn't really know each other very well, Jack said finally. Sometimes adults make decisions that seem right at the time, but later... He trailed off, unsure how to continue. Later they find out those decisions had consequences they didn't expect, Melissa finished quietly. Ethan seemed to accept this, turning his attention back to extracting the last of his milkshake through his straw. But Jack caught the flash of something in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding that adult relationships were messier than they appeared in the stories he read. As they walked back toward their hotel later, Ethan a few steps ahead examining the architecture of the buildings they passed, Melissa turned to Jack. What are you thinking? She asked. Jack watched his son, point excitedly at a gargoyle on a nearby building. That I've missed so much, he said honestly. That I don't know how to be a father. That I'm terrified I'll mess this up. Melissa's expression softened slightly. Welcome to parenthood, Jack. I've been terrified for 10 years straight. What do we do now? He asked. That depends, she said. What do you want? The question hung between them as Ethan ran back, tugging on Jack's sleeve to show him something he'd spotted. And in that moment, feeling the small hand on his arm, Jack realized he had no idea what he wanted anymore. The carefully constructed life he'd built suddenly seemed hollow, missing something he hadn't known to look for. The next morning, Jack woke to a text from Melissa. Ethan asked if you could join us at the Museum of Natural History today. No pressure. He texted back immediately. What time? Jack arrived at the museum entrance at 10:30, having rescheduled another day of meetings. Martin, his business partner, had cornered him before he left the office. What's going on with you? Martin had demanded. The Nakamura deal is hanging by a thread, and you're taking field trips? Family emergency, Jack had said, the word family feeling foreign on his tongue. You don't have family emergencies, Martin had replied, confusion evident. Your parents are gone, you're an only child, and you've never been with anyone longer than 3 months. Jack had no response to that painfully accurate assessment of his life. He'd simply walked out, leaving Martin staring after him. Now, watching Ethan race up the museum steps, Jack wondered what kind of father he could possibly be. He had no model to follow. His own father, while financially supportive, had been emotionally distant, more concerned with Jack's academic achievements than his happiness. Was that genetic too? Would he automatically become the same kind of father? They have real dinosaur bones, Ethan informed him as they entered the vast hall. Not just casts, some of them are millions of years old. Is that right? Jack replied, caught between amusement at Ethan's enthusiasm and a strange sense of inadequacy. This child knew more about dinosaurs than he did about quarterly projections. Throughout the morning, Jack observed the easy rhythm between Melissa and Ethan. The shorthand they had developed, the inside jokes, the way she anticipated his questions before he asked them. They were a unit, complete in themselves. Where did he fit in this picture, if at all? In the Hall of Ocean Life, beneath the massive blue whale suspended from the ceiling, Ethan ran ahead to examine a display about deep-sea creatures, leaving Jack and Melissa momentarily alone. "He's incredible," Jack said quietly. Melissa's smile was tinged with pride. "He is. You've done an amazing job with him." "It hasn't always been easy," she admitted. "The first year was..." She shook her head. "Let's just say there were nights I wished I had made a different choice in that bar in Chicago." The words stung, though Jack knew he had no right to feel hurt. "I'm sorry," he said. "If I had known..." "Would it have changed anything?" she interrupted, her gaze direct. "Really, Jack, if I had reached you with that voicemail, if you had known about the pregnancy, what would you have done?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities and roads not taken. Jack wanted to say he would have stepped up, done the right thing, been there from the beginning, but he wasn't sure that was true. The Jack of 11 years ago had been focused solely on his career trajectory, on building the life he now had. A child would have been a complication, an obstacle. "I don't know," he finally said, the honesty costing him. "I'd like to think I would have done right by both of you, but..." "But you were building an empire," Melissa finished for him without bitterness. "I figured as much. That's why I decided to do it on my own." "And now?" Jack asked. "Why tell me now?" Melissa watched Ethan, who was pressing his face against the glass of an exhibit, completely absorbed. "Because he deserves to know where he comes from. And because..." She hesitated. "Because I was diagnosed with MS last year." Jack felt the floor shift beneath him. "What?" "It's early stages," she said quickly. "I'm on medication, and the prognosis is good. Most people with MS live normal lifespans, but it made me think about Ethan's future, about what would happen if something did go wrong." She met his eyes. "He needs more than just me in his corner, Jack." The implications crashed over him. She wasn't just introducing a father to his son. She was creating a safety net for Ethan's future. Jack felt simultaneously honored and terrified by the responsibility. "I don't know how to be a father," he confessed. "Nobody does at first," she replied with a small smile. "You figure it out as you go." "Even from 700 miles away?" Her expression grew serious. "That's something we need to discuss. What role do you want in his life, Jack? Weekend visits? Holidays? Summer vacations? Or just child support checks and birthday cards?" Before he could answer, Ethan bounded back, bubbling with excitement about the bioluminescent creatures he'd just learned about. The conversation was shelved, but Jack felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him as they continued through the museum. That evening, after saying goodbye to Ethan and Melissa outside their hotel, Jack walked aimlessly through the city streets. The lights of Manhattan glittered around him, the same view he'd admired countless times before. But tonight, everything looked different. The city that had always represented opportunity and success now seemed lonely, its gleaming towers cold and impersonal. His phone buzzed with texts from Martin about the Nakamura deal, from a woman he'd been casually seeing who wanted to meet for drinks, from his assistant about Monday's schedule. The normal rhythm of his life calling him back. But all Jack could think about was Ethan's face as they'd said goodbye. The hopeful look, the tentative wave, the question in his eyes that Jack didn't know how to answer. What role did he want in his son's life? The truth was, he wanted more than he had any right to ask for. Saturday morning dawned with a clarity Jack hadn't felt in years. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. But somewhere in the pre-dawn hours, he'd reached a decision. It wasn't perfect, and it would require sacrifices he'd never contemplated before, but it felt right in a way few things in his life had. He called Melissa early, asking if they could meet before their planned afternoon at the Central Park Zoo. "Just us," he'd specified. "There are things we need to discuss." They met at a quiet cafe near their hotel, Ethan happily ensconced in the hotel room with his Nintendo Switch and room service breakfast, a combination Melissa admitted she rarely allowed but which seemed appropriate for vacation. "I've been thinking about what you asked," Jack began after they'd ordered coffee. "About what role I want in Ethan's life." Melissa nodded, her face carefully neutral. "And?" "I want to be his father," Jack said simply. "Not just in name or on weekends or holidays, I want to be part of his daily life." Surprise flickered across her face. "Jack, we live in Minneapolis. You're here. Your whole life is here." "I know," he acknowledged. "And I'm not suggesting you uproot Ethan. He has school, friends, your parents, his whole life there." He took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting I move to Minneapolis." Melissa stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I am," Jack insisted. "I've been thinking about it all night. Westridge has an office in Minneapolis. It's smaller than New York, but Martin's been trying to get me to expand our presence in the Midwest for years. I could transfer, open a new division." "You'd leave Manhattan? Just like that?" The disbelief in her voice was clear. "Jack, your career will continue," he finished. "Maybe differently, but it will continue. But Ethan..." He paused, struggling to articulate the certainty he felt. "Ethan won't be 10 forever. I've already missed a decade. I don't want to miss any more." Melissa studied him, her coffee cooling untouched between them. "This feels impulsive. You've known about him for less than a week." "It is impulsive," Jack admitted. "But that doesn't mean it's wrong. When I saw him yesterday explaining those exhibits with such excitement, all I could think was how many more moments like that I want to see. How many science projects and baseball games and birthdays I've already missed." "And what exactly are you picturing?" Melissa asked cautiously. "Because I need to be very clear. I'm not looking for a relationship with you, Jack. That's not why I came here." "I know," he said quickly. "This isn't about us. It's about Ethan. I'm not suggesting we play house or pretend to be something we're not. I'm talking about co-parenting, about both being present in his life." "Co-parenting requires trust," she pointed out, "and communication. We barely know each other." "Then we learn," Jack said, leaning forward. "For Ethan's sake, we figure it out. I'll get an apartment near you, not too close to be uncomfortable, but close enough that he can move easily between us. We'll establish boundaries, schedules, consistency." Melissa shook her head slowly, but Jack could see she was considering it. "You're talking about completely changing your life for a child you just met." "Yes," Jack said simply. "Because he's my son, and because..." He hesitated, then continued with raw honesty. "Because when I look at my life, at what I've built, I realize it's just things, accounts, properties, connections that aren't really connections at all. There's no legacy there, nothing that matters." Something in Melissa's expression softened. "Parenthood isn't a fix for an existential crisis, Jack." "I know that too," he acknowledged. "But meeting Ethan has made me see things differently, made me want to be different. Better." He met her gaze directly. "I want to try, Melissa. I'm asking for the chance to try." She was quiet for a long moment, turning her coffee cup in slow circles, the same nervous habit he'd noticed that first night in his apartment. Finally, she looked up. "If we do this, and that's a big if, we need ground rules," she said. Ethan's stability comes first. No promises you can't keep, no disappearing when it gets hard, and we make decisions about his life together. Hope surged in Jack's chest. Agreed, all of it. And you need to understand that this isn't going to be easy for him, she continued. He's going to have questions, confusion, maybe even anger. He's had 10 years of a certain kind of life, and this changes everything. I know, Jack said soberly. I'm prepared for that. Melissa's gaze was penetrating. Are you? Really? Because children aren't clients or deals, Jack. They're messy and complicated, and they need consistency more than grand gestures. The challenge in her words was clear, but Jack didn't flinch. I want to learn, he said simply. I want to be the father he deserves, even if I have no idea how to do that yet. After a long moment, Melissa nodded slowly. Okay, she said. We'll try, but we take it slow. You come to Minneapolis, get settled, and we ease Ethan into this. No rushing. Relief and terror coursed through Jack in equal measure. Thank you, he said, meaning it more deeply than perhaps any words he'd ever spoken. As they walked back to the hotel to collect Ethan, Melissa glanced at him. You realize you're going to have to tell him, right? Today, before we leave tomorrow. The prospect was daunting, but Jack nodded. I know. Any advice? Be honest, she said. He can handle the truth better than pretty lies. And Jack? She stopped, turning to face him fully. Don't make promises you can't keep. That's the quickest way to break his heart. The warning hung between them as they continued walking, a reminder of the immense responsibility Jack had just volunteered and shoulder, and how easily he could fail if he approached fatherhood with the same detachment he'd approached the rest of his life. Telling Ethan turned out to be simultaneously easier and more difficult than Jack had anticipated. They chose to do it after the zoo, back at Jack's apartment, where Ethan had been curious to return. Does he have any games? He'd asked Melissa, who'd smiled and said, I doubt it, but you can ask. Now, with Ethan sitting somewhat awkwardly on Jack's pristine couch, a designer piece selected more for aesthetics than comfort, Jack found himself struggling for words. So, he began, glancing at Melissa for support. She nodded encouragingly but remained silent. This was his moment. Ethan, your mom and I have been talking, and there's something important we want to discuss with you. Ethan looked between them, suddenly alert. Am I in trouble? No, not at all, Jack assured him quickly. It's about me, and you, and our relationship. Ethan's brow furrowed in that way that was so eerily similar to Jack's own expression when puzzling through a problem. What relationship? We just met. The blunt assessment stung, but Jack pressed on. That's true. But the thing is, I'd like to change that. I'd like us to get to know each other better, a lot better. Why? Ethan asked, direct as always. Jack took a deep breath. Because I'm your father, and I've missed 10 years of your life, and I'd very much like to be part of the rest of it, if that's something you might want too. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing. I know you're my biological father, he said finally, the adult term sounding strange from his young mouth. Mom explained about DNA and genetics and stuff. Right, Jack nodded, uncertain where to go from here. But being a father is different from just having the same DNA, Ethan continued, his gaze surprisingly steady. My friend Zach's dad left when he was a baby, and he says a real dad is someone who's there for you, not just someone whose blood you have. Jack felt the words like a physical blow, recognizing their truth. You're absolutely right, he said quietly. And I haven't been there for you. I didn't know about you, but that doesn't change the fact that I missed those years. So what are you saying? Ethan asked, a hint of wariness creeping into his voice. That you want to see me sometimes? Like on holidays or something? Actually, Jack said, glancing at Melissa, who gave him a small nod, I was thinking of something more regular than that. I'm planning to move to Minneapolis. Ethan's eyes widened. You are? Why? To be near you, Jack said simply. To have the chance to be a real father, not just a biological one. To be there for school events and baseball games and science projects. To get to know you and maybe, if you're willing, to let you get to know me too. Ethan looked to his mother. Is this for real? Melissa nodded. Jack and I have discussed it, and if it's something you're comfortable with, we're going to try to work out an arrangement where you spend time with both of us. Like Maddie Chen? Ethan asked. She goes to her dad's every other weekend and Wednesdays for dinner. Something like that, Melissa confirmed, though we'd work out the details based on what works best for everyone. Ethan considered this, his young face serious with concentration. Would I have to call you Dad? He finally asked Jack. The question caught Jack off guard. You can call me whatever you're comfortable with, he said after a moment. Jack is fine for now. Ethan nodded slowly. I think I'd like to get to know you better, he said carefully, but I'm not sure about the other stuff yet. Relief flooded through Jack. It wasn't a wholehearted embrace, but it was an opening, a chance he hadn't dared hope for. That's more than fair, he said. We can take it one step at a time. When would you move? Ethan asked, practical even in this emotional moment. I'd need a few weeks to arrange things at work, Jack explained. Maybe a month or so, but I could visit before then if that's okay with you and your mom. Ethan seemed to accept this, though Jack could see the wheels turning in his mind, processing this dramatic shift in his life's landscape. Do you know how to play Minecraft? He asked suddenly. Jack blinked at the non sequitur. No, I don't think so. I could teach you, Ethan offered, a tentative olive branch. It's not that hard once you learn the crafting recipes. I'd like that, Jack said, his throat unexpectedly tight. I'd like that very much. As the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Ethan's school, his friends, his hobbies, Jack caught Melissa watching them with a complex expression, caution, hope, and something like wonder at the strange new family configuration taking shape before her eyes. Later, after Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, the first time Jack's apartment had ever hosted a sleeping child, Melissa joined Jack on his balcony. You're really going to do this, she said, not a question but a statement tinged with lingering disbelief. Jack looked out at the city skyline, the view he'd paid a premium for, but would soon leave behind. Yes, he said simply. I am. It won't be easy, she warned. Not just the logistics, but the emotional part. He's going to test you, push boundaries, maybe even reject you at times. Children aren't rational creatures. I know, Jack said, though in truth, he had only the vaguest notion of what he was getting into. But I've spent my whole adult life doing what was easy, what benefited me, what advanced my career, what looked good on paper. Maybe it's time I did something hard but right. Melissa studied him in the dim light, her expression softening. You know, in Chicago, I thought I saw something in you, something beyond the successful businessman exterior. A depth, a capacity for more. She smiled slightly. Maybe I wasn't entirely wrong. The words touched something in Jack, a recognition of a self he'd buried beneath years of ambition and careful distance. I hope not, he said quietly. As they stood there in companionable silence, Jack realized that whatever happened next, however difficult or messy or complicated it might be, he had made the first truly meaningful decision of his adult life. And strangely, despite the uncertainty stretching before him, he felt more at peace than he had in years. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of activity and upheaval. Jack had never realized how deeply entrenched he was in his New York life until he began the process of extracting himself from it. There were professional considerations, transferring clients, restructuring his role at the firm, convincing Martin that he wasn't having a midlife crisis. There were practical matters, finding an apartment in Minneapolis, arranging for movers, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. And there were personal complications. Explaining his sudden departure to friends and colleagues required a level of honesty Jack wasn't accustomed to. "I recently discovered I have a 10-year-old son" was not a statement that invited casual conversation. Throughout it all, Jack maintained regular contact with Ethan. Awkward FaceTime calls at first, gradually becoming more comfortable as they discovered shared interests. Ethan was teaching him Minecraft as promised, patiently explaining crafting recipes and the differences between creative and survival modes. Jack found himself looking forward to these calls, scheduling meetings around them rather than the other way around. He flew to Minneapolis twice during those weeks, once to look at apartments and once simply to spend a weekend with Ethan. They went to a Twins game, toured the Mall of America, and visited the Science Museum. Jack watched how Ethan interacted with Melissa, noting the routines and rules he'd need to learn, the small preferences and habits that made Ethan uniquely himself. By the time moving day arrived in early May, Jack had secured an apartment in a neighborhood just 10 minutes from Melissa's house. Close enough for convenience, but not so close as to feel intrusive. It was smaller than his New York loft, with none of the designer flourishes, but it had a second bedroom that he'd furnished specifically for Ethan, consulting the boy via FaceTime about color preferences and desk placement. Martin had finally accepted Jack's decision, though not without a parting shot. "I never pegged you for the family man type, Brennan, but I guess DNA trumps career ambition." Jack had simply smiled. "Not DNA, Martin. My son." The phrase still felt new on his tongue, but increasingly right. His first official weekend with Ethan arrived just days after he'd settled into the new apartment. They'd agreed on a Friday night to Sunday afternoon schedule, with the possibility of Wednesday dinners once they established a routine. When Melissa dropped Ethan off that Friday evening, Jack felt a nervousness he hadn't experienced since his first major client presentation 15 years earlier. What if Ethan was bored? What if they ran out of things to talk about? What if the reality of fatherhood was something he simply couldn't master? "He's already had dinner," Melissa explained, handing over a duffel bag with Ethan's clothes and necessities. "But he'll probably want a snack before bed. No screen time after 9, and he needs to read for at least 20 minutes before lights out at 10. Jack nodded, mentally cataloging these instructions alongside the dozens of others she'd shared over the past weeks. "Got it. And he has my number if he needs anything," she added, a hint of anxiety in her voice. It was the first night she'd be away from Ethan since Jack had entered the picture. "We'll be fine," Jack assured her, with more confidence than he felt. "Right, Ethan?" Ethan, who had already begun exploring the apartment, called back, "Mom, Jack has a PlayStation 5. Can we play after I check out my room?" Melissa raised an eyebrow at Jack, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "It was a housewarming gift to myself," he explained. "And him." "Uh-huh," she said, but there was a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Remember, school night rules still apply even on weekends. Don't let him stay up until midnight playing video games." After she left, Jack stood awkwardly in his own living room, suddenly unsure how to proceed. Ethan emerged from the second bedroom, his expression hard to read. "The room's cool," he said. "Thanks for the desk lamp. It's like the one Mom wouldn't let me get because she said it was too expensive." Jack made a mental note to coordinate future purchases with Melissa. "I'm glad you like it. Are you hungry? Your mom said you had dinner, but I could make a snack." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe later. Can we play PlayStation now?" The evening unfolded more naturally than Jack had feared. They played video games, Ethan demonstrating a skill level that made Jack suspect he'd downplayed his experience to make Jack feel better about his own fumbling attempts. They made microwave popcorn and watched an episode of a show Ethan liked about kids with superpowers. It was normal, comfortable, even. The first hitch came at bedtime. Jack had reminded Ethan about reading time, only to discover he hadn't brought a book. "We can download something," Jack suggested, reaching for his iPad. Ethan wrinkled his nose. "Mom says physical books are better before bed, something about blue light and melatonin." Jack, who typically read financial reports on his tablet until he fell asleep, was at a loss. "I don't think I have any books appropriate for your age." Ethan looked around the still sparsely decorated apartment. "Don't you read?" "Of course," Jack said, slightly defensive. "Just mostly adult things, business books, biographies." Ethan considered this. "Do you have any Harry Potter? Mom's reading the 4th one with me right now, but I've read the first 3 by myself already." Jack shook his head. "Sorry, no." "What about when you were a kid?" Ethan persisted. "What did you read then?" The question caught Jack off guard. What had he read as a child? His father had emphasized educational reading, encyclopedias, historical accounts, biographies of great men. But there had been fiction too, books his mother had given him that his father had dismissed as wastes of time. "I liked adventure stories," he said slowly, memory stirring. "There was one series about a boy detective that I read over and over, and I loved The Hobbit." Ethan's face lit up. "You've read The Hobbit? That's on my summer reading list." "I might still have my copy somewhere," Jack said, suddenly remembering the box of childhood books he'd never unpacked in New York but had automatically included in the move. "Let me check." He found the box in the spare closet, still sealed with packing tape. Opening it revealed a small collection of well-worn paperbacks, their spines cracked from multiple readings. Among them was The Hobbit. Its cover faded, but the familiar image of the green door still visible. "Here," he said, returning to Ethan's room. "It's pretty old, but the story's the same." Ethan took the book reverently. "This was really yours? When you were my age?" "A little older, maybe," Jack said, strangely moved by the sight of his son holding his childhood book. "I think I was 12 when I first read it." Ethan opened the cover, examining the yellowed pages. "There's writing here," he said, pointing to the inside cover. Jack looked over his shoulder and felt his breath catch. In faded blue ink, in his mother's elegant handwriting. "To Jack, on your 12th birthday, may you find many adventures between these pages. Love, Mom." "That's from my mother," Jack said softly. "Your grandmother." Ethan traced the inscription with his finger. "She died, right? Before I was born." "Yes," Jack confirmed. "Both my parents did. My mother when I was in college, my father about 7 years ago." "Do you miss them?" Ethan asked, looking up at Jack with genuine curiosity. The question was simple but profound. "Yes," Jack said after a moment. "I do, especially at times like this, moments they should have been part of." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Like meeting me." "Exactly like meeting you," Jack agreed. "My mother would have adored you. She was always after me to give her grandchildren." "What about your dad?" Jack hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of his father but unwilling to lie. "My father was complicated. He wasn't very demonstrative. That means he didn't show his feelings much. But I think he would have been proud to have such a smart grandson." Ethan seemed satisfied with this answer. He settled back against his pillows and opened the book. "Can I really read this? It won't fall apart or anything?" "It's yours now," Jack said impulsively. "A gift from me to you, and kind of from your grandmother too." Ethan's smile was worth every box Jack had packed, every explanation he'd given, every doubt he'd pushed aside. "Thanks, Jack." There had been a slight pause before his name, a moment when Jack thought Ethan might say something else. But it was enough for now. More than enough. Later, after checking that Ethan was asleep, the boy had managed to read 3 chapters before his eyes had started drooping. Jack sent Melissa a text. "All good here. He's asleep. We had a good evening." Her reply came quickly. "Glad to hear it. How are you doing?" Jack considered the question. How was he doing? His life had been completely upended. He'd left behind a successful career track, a city he loved, a lifestyle he'd spent years cultivating. He was living in a hastily furnished apartment in a city where he knew almost no one, trying to forge a relationship with a child who was half stranger, half mirror. And yet, "I'm good," he texted back. "Really good." It wasn't just politeness or bravado. Sitting in his quiet apartment, listening to the soft sounds of his son sleeping in the next room, Jack felt a sense of rightness that had eluded him for years, as if he'd been walking slightly out of step with the world and had finally found the correct rhythm. The road ahead would be complicated. He had no illusions about that. There would be disagreements with Melissa about parenting approaches, adjustments as Ethan grew accustomed to dividing his time between two homes, challenges as Jack learned to balance work and fatherhood. But for the first time in his adult life, Jack felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. His phone buzzed with another text from Melissa. "Good night, Jack, and thank you for trying." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. Setting his phone aside, Jack picked up the copy of The Hobbit that Ethan had left on the coffee table. He ran his fingers over his mother's handwriting, remembering how she'd always encouraged his imagination, even as his father had pushed him toward practicality. What would she think of him now, this new version of himself he was becoming? He liked to think she'd approve. 6 months later, Jack stood on the sidelines of a soccer field, stamping his feet against the November cold as he watched Ethan's team battle against a rival school. Minneapolis winters were harsher than New York's, something he was still adjusting to, but he barely noticed the temperature as he cheered Ethan's successful pass to a teammate. "He's getting better," Melissa commented, appearing beside him with 2 steaming cups of coffee from the concession stand. She handed one to Jack. "His coach says he has good field vision." "Thanks," Jack said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "And yeah, he's really improved since the season started." They stood in heightened, companionable silence watching the game. Their relationship had evolved over the past months into something Jack would cautiously call friendship. The initial awkwardness had gradually given way to a functional co-parenting dynamic built on mutual respect and their shared love for Ethan. It hadn't been without challenges. Their parenting styles sometimes clashed. Jack tended toward indulgence while Melissa was more structured and consistent. They'd had heated discussions about everything from bedtimes to screen time limits to appropriate consequences for forgotten homework. But they'd established a united front for Ethan's sake, learning to compromise and communicate in ways Jack had never had to do in his professional life. "How's the new medication working?" Jack asked quietly, glancing at Melissa. She shrugged slightly. "Some fatigue, but the neurologist says that's normal at first. The MRI showed no new lesions, which is good news." Her MS diagnosis had become part of their shared reality. Jack had accompanied her to several doctor appointments, partly to understand the condition better and partly to demonstrate his commitment to being a permanent fixture in both their lives. The possibility of Melissa's health deteriorating in the future was a shadow they acknowledged, but tried not to let dominate their present. "Parent-teacher conferences are next week," Melissa reminded him. "Tuesday at 4:30. Can you make it, or should I reschedule?" "I'll be there," Jack assured her. "I've already blocked the time." On the field, Ethan intercepted a pass and began dribbling toward the goal. The parents around them increased their cheering, Jack among the loudest. Ethan took the shot and scored. His teammates mobbed him as Jack and Melissa applauded enthusiastically. Ethan looked toward the sidelines, his face breaking into a wide smile when he spotted them. He gave a small wave before returning to position for the restart. "He looked for us both," Melissa noted quietly. "That's new." Jack had noticed it too. In the early months, Ethan had always looked to Melissa first, with Jack as an afterthought. The subtle shift warmed him more than the coffee in his hands. After the game, a 3-2 victory for Ethan's team, they took him for pizza to celebrate, a tradition they'd established for post-game meals regardless of the outcome. As Ethan regaled them with a play-by-play analysis of the match, Jack caught Melissa's eye across the table. She gave him a small smile, acknowledging the moment's simple perfection. Later, as they walked to their cars in the restaurant parking lot, Ethan ran ahead to examine a particularly interesting puddle, leaving Jack and Melissa momentarily alone. "Thanksgiving is in 2 weeks," Melissa said. "My parents are coming, as usual. They'd like to meet you." Jack felt a flutter of nervousness. Melissa's parents knew about him, of course, but scheduling conflicts had prevented a meeting thus far. "I'd like that too," he said. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," she replied. Then, after a slight hesitation, "Unless you had other plans? I know we haven't discussed holiday arrangements yet." The question held more weight than its casual delivery suggested. This would be their first major holiday as this new family configuration. "No other plans," Jack assured her. "I'd be honored to join you." Melissa nodded, relief visible in her expression. "Good. Ethan will be happy. He's been worried about you being alone for the holidays." The comment caught Jack by surprise. "He has?" "He asked if you would be sad eating Thanksgiving dinner by yourself," Melissa explained. "I told him we'd invite you, but I hadn't had a chance to bring it up yet." Jack glanced at Ethan, who was now attempting to balance on the edge of a parking bumper, arms outstretched like a tightrope walker. The thought that his son had been concerned about his happiness, his loneliness, struck him deeply. "Hey, Jack." Melissa's voice pulled him back from his thoughts. "There's something else I've been meaning to ask you." Her tone made him turn to face her fully. "What is it?" "Ethan's birthday is in January," she said. "He'll be 11. I usually do a small party at our house, just a few friends, family." She paused. "I was thinking maybe this year we could do something together. Co-host, I mean." The offer represented a significant step forward in their co-parenting relationship, a public acknowledgement of Jack's place in Ethan's life. "I'd really like that," he said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the emotion welling in his chest. "Good," Melissa smiled, "because he's already planning a guest list, and you're definitely on it." Before Jack could respond, Ethan called from near the cars. "Mom! Jack! Can we get ice cream on the way home?" "It's 40 degrees out," Melissa called back, laughing. "So?" Ethan replied with the impeccable logic of a 10-year-old. "Ice cream doesn't melt as fast when it's cold." Jack and Melissa exchanged amused glances. "Your turn to be the bad guy," she murmured. "I did it last time with the second helping of cake." "Actually," Jack said, a mischievous smile spreading across his face, "I was thinking ice cream sounds pretty good right now." Melissa rolled her eyes, but her expression was fond. "You're hopeless, both of you." As they debated the merits of ice cream in November, walking toward their cars with Ethan bouncing between them, Jack was struck by how ordinary the moment was, and how extraordinary that made it. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined this life. Soccer games and parent-teacher conferences, pizza dinners and holiday plans, the comfortable back and forth of co-parenting. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, of uncertainty, of stepping on each other's toes. But it was real in a way his previous life had never been. And when Ethan, climbing into Jack's car for the ride to the ice cream shop, casually called over his shoulder, "Hurry up, Dad, before the place closes," Jack felt the world shift once again, this time settling into its rightful place. Dad. Such a simple word. 3 letters that changed everything. In the rearview mirror, he caught Melissa's gaze as she stood by her own car. She'd heard it too. She gave him a small nod, acknowledging the milestone, before turning to get into her vehicle. "Coming right up," Jack replied, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Seatbelt on?" "Already done," Ethan confirmed, completely unaware of the seismic impact his casual word choice had caused. "Can I get 2 scoops?" "Let's not push our luck with your mom," Jack advised, starting the car. "1 scoop tonight, maybe 2 next weekend at my place." "Deal," Ethan agreed easily. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Melissa following in her car, Jack glanced at his son in the passenger seat. This miracle he hadn't known to look for, this gift he hadn't known to want. What had begun as a shocking disruption had become the center around which his world now revolved. Not a one-night stand after all, but the beginning of the most important relationship of his life. "Hey, Dad," Ethan said, testing the word again, more deliberately this time. "Thanks for coming to my game today." "I wouldn't have missed it for anything," Jack replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Not for anything in the world."